In this lesson, we begin with secondary corrections. Previously, with primary corrections, we have edited the entire image. In other words, every color correction we made was applied to each single pixel in the image. Conversely, secondary corrections could also be called selective corrections. This means that we can select a specific part of the image that we'll be correcting. In DaVinci Resolve, we have a number of options for making such a selection. The easiest and likely the most utilized tool for secondary corrections are masks. In DaVinci Resolve, masks are called windows. The application offers 5 basic window shapes: linear window, which is a square or a rectangle; circular window, represented by a circle or an oval; polygonal window, that is an object having any number of edges; power curve, an object that can be a combination of a polygon with Bezier curves; and gradient, that is a gradual transition between two lines. It's important to mention that in the latest DaVinci Resolve versions, we're no longer limited by the number of windows, which means that we can add and combine many more of them. Let's systematically look at all the types. Let's say that in this video, we'd like to bring the actor to the forefront as much as possible. That is, we'd like for this area to be lighter. We start by creating a new node. Activate circular window and move it over the actor. In fact, we have now made a selection and marked the section of our image which we will edit. Let's brighten the image, adjusting the gamma and gain controllers. For instructional purposes, I'm making a more visible, less realistic correction just to illustrate more clearly how corrections work. If we move the window, we see that the change is applied only within the selected portion of the image, that is, inside the window. Let's shape the window into an oval and rotate it so that it covers the actor better. To see the result more clearly, the oval shape can be temporarily disabled. As we see, the transition from lighter to the darker area is quite significant and the result doesn't look good. We therefore need to soften the transition. For this, we use the softness tool, which can be adjusted directly in the oval. The other option is modifying the parameter within the softness window. The correction is starting to look natural. If we'd like to add another circular window, we can click on this icon. Let's brighten the wheel on the grinding machine, for example. Both circular windows are located in the node where we made the color correction. That is, the correction is the same for both circular windows, and the sections brighten in the same way. If, however, we wanted to make the grinding wheel a little less light, we can do so using the opacity parameter. I'll lower the correction by, say, 20% and set this parameter to 80%. Picture sections can be brightened but also darkened, of course. I'll create another node. Next, I darken, for example, the glass on the window, which seems too dominant. Select the linear window and move the points to their appropriate spots. Lower the gamma and gain. Since we don't see the whole glass, we need to somehow remove the correction on the tools that are located in front of it. Here I will use the power curve. Simply by clicking, I create points that turn into edges of a polygon. If, however, I hold the click and move the mouse, I create a curved edge, or a Bezier curve. This way, I'm able to cut out the tools from the front of the glass. We close Power Curve by returning to and clicking on the first point, and check the result. It, however, turns out differently than we'd want. This is because both window masks were summed, that is, we enlarged the area where the correction was applied. In order to make the right correction, we need to subtract the Power Curve window from the linear window. First, I'll name our windows so that we can navigate our project easier. Let's highlight the Tools window and select the mask. Now the selection is correct. Further, we can set slight softness for the Power Curve in order to achieve smoother edges. In this node, we can also create a polygonal window for a lighter image edge. A polygonal window is always created by 4 points, and clicking the mouse, we can add more points. This jar, however, has a round shape, and we see that Power Curve would be a better choice here. So how to erase a window? If we go to this menu, we see the Delete Selected Window option. After clicking it, we notice that only windows other than these 5 presets can be deleted. That is, all the windows we have created using these icons. However, here a window can be deactivated. If we wanted to use it at a different spot, we can reset it in the menu to its original state. So let's pick a more appropriate Power Curve and repeat the mask. As you have noticed, I'm using zoom and pan when creating windows. The settings may differ from mouse to mouse, but on my mouse, zoom is the middle wheel, and pan is applied by pressing it, which works as the middle mouse button. Gradient can be used to darken the sky, for example. After activating it, an arrow line is created showing the gradient direction. I'll lower gamma slightly. The arrow's end determines the window end, and can be imagined as a parallel line where the gradient starts. The vignetta correction is quite popular and makes the image edges gradually darker than the center. It is, in fact, a circular window with higher softness. I'll adjust gamma to make the image darker. However, since we selected the image center, our circular window shows the opposite, that is, the center is darker than the edges. Here we can use the invert button, which means that we actually select the area outside the circular window. We now achieved what we wanted, and the edges are darker than the center of the image. Using masks, our picture may not only be lightened or darkened. We can make all other image corrections DaVinci Resolve offers. Further, in DaVinci Resolve, selections can be made in other ways besides masks. Let's say that in this shot, we'd like to change the color of the shirt. Making the selection using window masks would be quite tedious, especially if the person and the camera moved. The selection can also be made by defining the image parameters. We are able to select all light or dark areas, as well as all that is red, desaturated, and so on. In our example, we'd like to select all the image parts that are blue. Let's switch to the qualifier window. Click on the blue shirt and begin the selection. Using the highlight button, we can check the image area we have thus far selected. We see that additional parts of the shirt, that is other shades of blue, should be added. We can do so with this button. We successfully selected the whole part of the shirt. Let's look closer at how the selection works. The shirt color is determined by three parameters: hue, saturation, and luminance. In hue, we see that blue color has been selected. In saturation, we have limited the color to less saturated blue, and in luminance, the whole selection is further limited to moderately light tones. Our selection is thus a combination of these three parameters. If we switch off any of the parameters, we see that the selection is not as precise as when all three are used. In the selection, all areas in the upper part of the graph are set to 100%, and at these spots, the selection diminishes all the way to 0%. To further specify our selection, we can also use manual value input. If, for example, we'd like to extend the hue range, I can do so here. If we wish to refine the selection and add softness, we do so using this parameter. However, try as we may, 100% perfect selection is impossible, especially if our material contains noise or grain. In those cases, we can use two other parameters, denoise and blur. Yet, these parameters don't need to be exaggerated and only small values suffice. When the selection is complete, we can move to the correction itself, that is, we can adjust the color of the shirt. In Qualifier, there are other types of color selection based on RGB or just on luminance. Compared to RGB, HSL choice is more widely used because it is easier for orientation, and the actual video signal is in fact created in this way. In the menu, there are several qualifier presets that often help as the point of departure for the appropriate selection. It happens at times that using qualifier, we are unable to isolate completely the image portion we'd like to change. If, for example, we wanted to change only a portion of the shirt, such selection would not be doable using qualifier. However, selections can be combined with window masks. I switch to Window, select Power Curve, and mark only the shoulder parts of the shirt. So, combining qualifier with window, we can make more complex selections for secondary corrections. In DaVinci Resolve, there is yet another way of making a selection using curves. For instance, using hue versus hue curve, we are able to make a selection and color modification in a single tool. Let's try to change the shirt color with this tool. The color is located somewhere within this color range. Let's limit the range using 2 points. By moving a third point in the middle of the selection, hue, that is the color of the delimited area, can be adjusted. The points can be erased with a right click. If I erase the limit points, no selection is activated, so I'll be changing the hue parameter for the entire image. This way, we'd also be able to adjust the color of the grass, for example. The other curves work similarly. For example, the hue versus saturation curve can bleach or saturate the shirt. Hue versus luminance makes the shirt lighter or darker. If we're not sure about the location of color we wish to change, we can use the help of this tool. Each curve window contains also presets for all basic colors of the entire color spectrum. However, selections by means of curves utilize just one parameter while the qualifier uses 3. That means that we should work carefully with curves. When we come across an issue, as in this case, for example, where the color correction inadvertently continues into the water, the selection needs to be extended either by a window mask or by using the qualifier instead of curves. In this lesson, we have seen 3 basic ways of making secondary corrections. These were selections using masks called windows, using the qualifier tool, and finally using curves.